The story starts with a pirate ship going in the sea. And there a girl wondering the sea still looks blue in the another world. And all of the sudden she became anxious thinking what is going to happen to her. And while she was thinking about that, someone calls her name as Rita-sama. And this shocked her. And with a relief, she says from now onwards that her name is Rita Scrine, the daughter of the Duke Scrine. And she goes on by saying that she is not longer Yano Kane. And about 2 weeks ago, a girl goes to sleep in her bed. And she was fully exhausted from the office work. And she was cursing her boss giving her extra work, since she got to get scolded for a mistake that her under-colleagues had done. And moreover, she was at the vacation. Afterwards, she thinks that the worst part here is that whenever they go out to drink, everybody is asking about if she got a boyfriend. And she smilingly says no. And one of her friends says that it will be bad if she doesn't get herself a man to be with. And she says that she is 28 years old, with having a no boyfriend. Afterwards, she was lying in her bed talking to her fox plushie about whenever she thinks about love. She remembers a day where a guy confesses his love to her. And his name is Hashina Hiroto-kun. And he was her first love. And when he confessed to her, she was happy. But then suddenly, she says sorry to him, as a denial of his confessions. But then without getting so emotional, he just says that he is glad to confess and let her know how he is feeling. And he just left without saying any word. And she notices the fox keychain in his phone. Afterwards that incident, he transferred to a different school. And she realizes it's her own fault for not able to move on. And then she goes on by muttering about what he is doing now. And all of the sudden something comes from the ceiling. While she was muttering, if only I could go back in time. And in the end she realizes that something popped up in the ceiling. But before she could react, it became so bright, making her to close her eyes. And then suddenly someone says, "Is his the person?" And she opens her eyes thinking that sounds exactly like her, even though she never spoke. And then someone that looks like a noble asks her if she is the one that's going to replace her daughter. And then the girl says to her father to not be rude to her, and they should introduce themselves. And she says her name as Rita Scrine. And then he says his name as Zach, Rita's father. And he says this mansion is one of the property that was owned by the Rita's family. And this just shocked Yano. And she was wondering, "Who are you?" And then with an excitement, Rita asks Yano's name. And after hearing her name, Rita says Yano's name is little weird. While she was saying that, Yano was thinking that she looks exactly like her. And she comes to realization of Duke means a noble. And she started to panic, thinking how did she ended up in here? And with the happiness in Rita's face, she says she summoned her from another world since she looked exactly like her, while showing her magician. And this information just overloads Yano's mind. In the end, she couldn't able to comprehend everything, while Rita is asking if she is okay. Afterwards, with a fear in her eyes, Yano asks the Duke on why she got summoned anyways. And suddenly the Duke says that she have to take place of Rita and marry the King Eugene. And that left Yano nothing but puzzled. And Yano says that she can't marry a king since she growed up in a common household. So her marrying the king will only put the Duke in the bad reputation. But then the Duke says he wouldn't be doing something like this if it weren't for that cruel wolf. But then Yano was thinking bad wolf. Afterwards the Duke says the young ruler of the Feuerreichs, Eugene Eistelot, is an ruthless tyrant. Afterwards Rita apologizes to her, saying that he is not as bad as the rumor says. He only puts his country over anything. And she says that everything took her by surprising. And Yano was confused after hearing it. And then Rita started to cry by saying that she was never been in love. So if she gets married, she might never know what is it to truly love someone. and her dad joined in telling her not to cry. And suddenly his expression changes and he demands Yano to take Rita's position. And this made Yano anxious. And she asked a mage if she can go back, since she can't do it. But that mage just says he can't do it, since they can only summon people from another world and cannot send them back. And this made her scared and Yano started to tremble. And the Duke says if she refuses it now he can't guarantee her safety. And Yano was just silent. And all of the sudden Rita comes in saying that it's just for a while. Only for the time she finds someone that she truly loves, with a crying face. Afterwards hearing that she decides to help them since Rita was asking her really. And Yano realizes she doesn't got any other option but to help them. And at the present the servant named Tilda tells to Yano the current Rita to not be emotionally unavailable in the public, since she is now a noble. Afterwards Tilda says it can't be helped, since she is going to her married to a cruel wolf. And Yano smilingly dodges the question. And Yano thinks to herself that according to Duke the young king is both cruel and cold. And it's so obvious that the Duke went so far to prepare a body double. Afterwards Tilda says that she will be there to back Yano if anything bad happens. And Yano was really happy to hear that. And all of the sudden Tilda says it's a job for her. So if it gets dangerous she will run away alone. After that she says it was a joke. After a while they reach to that king's room. And they tells her to wait outside. And Yano was feeling nervous, since beyond that door is King Eugene is waiting for her. And after coming inside, Yano started to introduce herself to the king as Rita. But while she was saying that, the king started to walk near her. And he tells Yano to lift her head. And he goes on by grabbing her head. And he looks at her face closely. And he says that she is acting cold and formal to someone who she is going to marry. Annie asks her if she is feeling guilty about something, which made her feel terrified. And Yano started to think if he had found the truth. And she goes on by saying this is their first meetup, so it's making her nervous. And she goes on by thinking if that sounds convincing. But all of the sudden he says that her voice and everything resembles her. But this shocked Yano. But before she could speak, he says that he prepared her a room to stay. And before leaving the room he says that neither of us wants this marriage. But we still need to go through the formalities. And after leaving the room he says that they will talk tomorrow. But she was just confused. Afterwards they were in their room. And her maid Tilda leaves the room by saying her to take rest, since she is going to get a tour around the castle. Afterwards a while Yano happily went to her bed. And she goes on by opening her bag. And she took out her mobile phone from that bag. And it had her fox keychain as well. After having that in her hand she was really happy. And then she thinks that she is not confident enough to act perfectly. And she goes on by thinking that the king said that she resembles someone. And she decides to talk about it tomorrow. And she says that she doesn't want to see him. But he was standing behind her. And he puts his hands on her shoulder, which shocked her. And he heard what she just said. And she goes on by asking him on why he is her. To which he just says he wanted to check up on her fiancé. But Yano was feeling really down, since the king heard what she had just said. And then suddenly the king shouts saying to Rita on where she got that phone. And she dropped it since his grip was really strong. And she realizes that the lock screen is her mother and Yano's selfie. And she started to panic thinking that he is going to kill her if he finds the truth. But then the king says Foxy, which made her shocked. And she suddenly asks him if he knew about Foxy. And Yano realizes that she asked the king that question without thinking. But then the king asks her if she is really Rita Scrine. And he goes on by closing their distance and asks Yano to tell her real name. And she tried to say a lie. But he demanded her to say the truth by shouting at her. And she said her real name from the other world. After saying it, she thinks to herself that it's over. But to her surprise, he just puts his hands in his eyes. And Yano was really confused. Afterwards, Eugene holds her hands, saying that his name is Hashina Hiroto, the guy that confessed to her before.